You're watching a video presentation of a study conducted by Mosemghvdlishvili and Professor Jansz at the Erasmus University Rotterdam and presented at the Etmaal 2012 conference. Smartphones have been called the Swiss Army knife of the digital age because they unite the functionalities of a cellular phone, a personal computer, an audio player, a digital camera, a GPS receiver into one converged device. However, what makes a smartphone a distinct technological artifact is its programmability. Programmability is what transforms a cell phone into a pocket-sized computer, meaning that a smartphone runs on a complete operating system that enables installing application software, commonly referred to as apps. Traditionally, writing software for cell phones was restricted and often a frustrating experience for developers due to the tight control of transnational mobile network carriers over the development process. Software developers needed to make deals with the carriers to be able to offer their application to users. Since 2008, when various OS providers allowed third-party developers to create and distribute application software, the number of apps has spurred. Despite such popularity, there is a serious lack of empirical research in this domain. Respectively, this was our aim to explore the app development process for smartphones by looking at how individual developers are creating application software for these devices. As our theoretical framework, we used the social shaping of technology perspective, which emphasizes the social contingency of technology. The central concept of social shaping of technology is negotiability, which points at the existence of a range of choices for any given technology which is negotiated amid relevant groups. Social shaping of technology points at closure of negotiation, when a consensus among different groups is sorted out or a standardized dominant design emerges. However, there are limitations to negotiability of technology. First, relevant groups involved in the development of technology might not be equal in terms of their power capacity or access to resources. And second, available solutions may be narrowed down due to irreversibility that explains the scope and manner in which choices can be foreclosed. By exploring the activities of developers within the complex system of the smartphone industry, we connect two notions: the negotiability of technology and user participation, and argue that opening up technical affordances of smartphones for users can be regarded as widening the range of actors who are involved in the shaping of this technology. In fact, software development by users has been regarded as the earliest mainstream form of online user-led participation and innovation. To tackle the diversity of roles into account, we developed a model which illustrates the continuum from an app user, any individual who uses apps, to a professional app developer, an employed professional who develops apps as a part of his working practice. Whereas developing an app does not necessarily require a person to be an employed professional, it definitely needs understanding of basic programming skills. Therefore, the vertical axis points at the level of expertise and augments from being an amateur to an expert. To explore how developers are negotiating the development of smartphones, we explored how they create apps for these devices. From the perspective of the social shaping of technology, we elaborated three research questions. The first inquired which relevant groups are involved in the development of smartphones. Bearing in mind the possible power asymmetries between relevant groups, the second question addressed how developers position themselves in relation to other groups. Taking into account the concept of irreversibility, the third question explored the possible limitations of available choices. We conducted 20 in-depth interviews with developers from 12 different countries. Our participants were overall highly educated. Their average age was 29. Our youngest developer was 14 years old. 40% of our participants identified themselves as independent or freelance developers. The second largest group were part-time developers who devoted their time equally to work-related as well as personal projects. And the remaining 15% were professional full-time developers. Interesting was to observe that developers consider themselves to be the group that gives meaning to a device. As one participant figuratively put it, without developers a smartphone is an expensive brick, expressing an idea that apps are what makes a smartphone multi-purpose device and provides various options how this technological artifact can be appropriated. While positioning themselves in relation to other players in terms of their power capacity, there was no clear consensus among participants. Even contrasting opinions were heard. However, the core group of our sample agreed that developers have strong collective power. Our participants identified three key groups within smartphone industry: carriers, device manufacturers, and OS providers. When asked to rank groups in terms of their power capacity, our participants found OS providers to be decisively influential in negotiating development of smartphones, followed by device manufacturers. A conceivable explanation is that for app creation, developers are strongly dependent on the platform that is run by one of the OS providers. In order to explore in more detail how developers were limited or enabled by OS providers, it was necessary to differentiate between various platforms. Currently, there are 5 major OS platforms: Apple's iOS, Google's Android, Microsoft's Windows Phone, Research in Motion's BlackBerry OS, and Nokia's Symbian. As such, most developers work for more than one platform and often rewrite the same app to make it compatible. Nevertheless, when asked to name the favorite OS for developing, participants were split between the two most popular systems, Google's Android and Apple's iOS. The main reason to favor Android was its open source and availability, whereas for Apple it was popularity of iPhone among users. The available platforms yielded to vary in their degree of accessibility, type of software licensing, whether proprietary or open source, type of programming language required for development, as well as control over distribution, in terms and conditions how a developer can distribute an app through an online marketplace. We summarized main differences among the most popular platforms from developers' perspective. Our participants saw Google's Android as the least restrictive and the most accessible, particularly for novice users who were just starting to develop their very first apps. 6 out of 7 participants who did not have previous experience in developing were creating apps using Android. The second most popular system, Apple's iOS, was seen as more restrictive. Apple not only defines in which programming language an app can be written, but also retains right to approve an app before it gets distributed through an app store, both for technical compatibility as well as for content. Approval process for apps developed by third-party developers was exercised by all other OS providers except Google. In a nutshell, app development is becoming an important cultural platform. When compared with previous featured mobile phones, the decision of various OS providers to release software development kit and allow third-party developers to create apps for their platforms is indeed a positive step. However, when analyzing how developers are creating applications, the difference between various platforms in regards to their openness, accessibility, as well as control over distribution was evident. There is a shift of power from mobile carriers to OS providers, which in our study emerged as a crucially influential group within smartphone industry. The main limitations that developers encountered in the process of development were related with the terms and conditions under which the OS providers allow them to create and distribute apps. What is particularly interesting in case of app development for smartphone is that collaborative work is largely absent. As seen in our sample, independent developers mostly work alone as freelancers or in small groups. Even in the case of the most open Android that is based on the very Linux kernel which was collaboratively created by user developers under the open source license, app developers are allowed to download software development kit, write an app, freely distribute it, but they do not contribute to Android's operating system directly. Emergence of app stores is a crucially important factor in defining the state and direction of application development for smartphones. App development stays on the threshold of creating a piece of single commodity which gets integrated in the platform only through marketplace. Apps created by individuals and small groups in totality are brought together only in app stores, which embody a premise of a marketplace rather than a shared platform for user innovation. For the future research, it is crucial to continue exploring how app development is occurring on smartphones by, for example, closely studying the terms and conditions of main OS providers. Next to this, it is important to expand exploration from user developers to amateur users and study how this segment of population, which is the overall majority of smartphone users, is appropriating these devices and thereby engaging in the negotiation of its development. If you want to hear about this research and its follow-up studies, feel free to contact one of the others. Thank you for watching this presentation.